me. And this awakening began 3 years ago in a Harrow Music Service September conference when, in a talk by the guitar teacher Richard Wright, he awakened me to many things that I taught that I didn't believe in. I realized I wasn't happy with the playing of even my best students, and their playing wasn't musical, and they had no clue what they were doing. They didn't understand how to practice. And I noticed that I had very few self-directed learners. So first I thought the problem was the curriculum. And after years of feeling that I couldn't find what I considered to be an appropriate curriculum, I began to write my own. And I studied the pioneers and innovators of guitar pedagogy over the last 2 centuries. And tempered with my experience, I wrote a method that I believe in. And upon completing and teaching with my curriculum, there was improvement, but I was still encountering much the same problems. The students weren't actually retaining the information in order to apply it. They didn't know how to practice effectively. Few students knew how to work consistently to reach goals. Little to no study skills. Few study strategies. Critical thinking, higher order thinking was very rare, but above all, I had the same problems year after year. When I found out it wasn't the curriculum, I had to look at myself as a teacher. And initially several things happened. And I read a book, and it's called Talent is Overrated by Jeff Colvin, which introduced me to the research of Erickson and showed me how deliberate practice can be applied to my teaching skills. This gave me the bad news, that I'd been believing erroneous excuses for years, but it gave me the good news that I had the power to reach my goals and the process to do so. I began seeking out the best teaching strategies to deliver the content. In short, how can I become a better teacher? And I had to ask myself a lot of hard questions. Questions like, am I willing to expose my weaknesses to become a better teacher? And I found that I had to look at my motives. Did I have the humility to see that I have one purpose here, and that's to actually help the students? That's my purpose, full stop. I found many shortcomings in my teaching. I had few teaching strategies, and out of the strategies I did have, some were good strategies but poorly executed. But many were ill-informed and ineffective. I didn't have defined goals for each lesson. I taught one way regardless of the student, and I wasn't teaching them how to practice. Because at that point, I didn't know how to practice effectively. I would play something, get it 2 or 3 times, figure I had it, and I would be completely amazed when it fell apart in performance. But by looking squarely at my ineptitude in my teaching and using what I'd learned in my research to devise new teaching strategies, I saw that I had to change my mindset and apply the principles of deliberate practice to myself in order to be a positive example to my students. And I began to view feedback as an opportunity to learn. And I took away valuable feedback every lesson from what the students understood and what they didn't understand. Why was I not reaching them? Why weren't they able to do it? It's not their fault. Also began to feel passionate about my teaching. Remember, I was cynical and jaded. I didn't see the point about it. But now I feel passionate about what I'm doing and that I'm of service to my students. And I began to see that this is probably the most important work I'll ever do. But about teaching the application of these principles. And I think it falls under 5 main headings. And the first one is the development of domain knowledge. And I think this starts with study skills. Because my students don't have them. They're not being shown study skills. They're passive learners. And a study by Nola Purdy and John Hattie in 1999 showed that when students are instructed explicitly in effective study habits, then cognitive and performance outcomes are enhanced. And these students are better able to apply these habits in other domains. I'm talking about simple study strategies like taking notes, revising these notes, writing down material repetitively, mnemonics. But whatever these strategies are, it takes repetition for them to work. It takes work and engagement with the material. When we give them study skills, then we can talk about the higher order thinking skills like critical thinking, creative thinking, and information processing. Those kinds of thinking you have to be able to talk about any form of music. The second main heading is explicit instruction regarding steps in devising and implementing strategies that yield reliable results. Pretty early in my teaching, I show the kids a scanning strategy where we ask questions like, what notes do I need to know to play this piece? What's the rhythm in the first bar? Does the rhythm stay the same in subsequent bars? How does it change? And are there any patterns? But by asking these questions, we get to mine a whole lot of information before we attempt the piece the very first time. This shows them that if they look into something and mine information before they attempt something, then their first attempts are much more informed. The third one is metacognition, and this is really thinking about one's thinking. This is the thinking process that I use to talk myself through the first bar of a piece. What are the notes? What's the rhythm like? Are there articulations? What are the dynamic markings? Also, it has a lot to do with self-evaluation, assessing task requirements and situational parameters, planning, executing, evaluating progress. It helps me to know what I know and what I don't know and what I need to know to reach my goals. And also, most important, to know my level of understanding of a subject. The fourth one is goal-oriented, concentrated practice in every domain. In every domain. I don't care if it's science, music, spelling. If I know how to practice, I can apply that skill to anything I do. I have to teach each student how to practice by guiding the student through the problem solving and correct repetitions in the lesson, because practice is problem solving and repeating it. My students don't know this. I have to show them.